Welcome to the story. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and support me. The silence of space was a comfort Marcus Hale had grown accustomed to. The endless void, dotted with distant stars, offered a solace that no planet could provide. For a seasoned pilot of the United Federation of Planet Space Corps, it was the only home he truly knew. The cockpit of his fighter, sleek and battle-worn, was his sanctuary. Every button, every dial, felt like an extension of his own body. He had flown countless missions, faced enemies most people couldn't imagine, and survived more than his share of close calls. But today, something felt different. His mission was supposed to be routine, a reconnaissance sweep of the outer rim. The region was known for its anomalies, strange energy readings, uncharted celestial bodies, and the occasional derelict ship. It was Marcus's job to map them, report back, and move on. Easy enough, or so he thought. As he approached the coordinates provided by the mission briefing, his sensors picked up a faint distress signal. Frowning, he leaned forward, adjusting the frequency to get a clearer reading. The signal was weak, barely a blip on his screen, but it was there, an alien distress beacon, broadcasting on a frequency the Federation rarely used. Odd, Marcus muttered to himself, his brow furrowing. Protocol dictated that he should investigate. After all, a stranded ship in this part of space could mean a valuable rescue or, at the very least, intelligence worth gathering. He adjusted his course and throttled up, the engines humming in response. As he closed in on the source of the signal, the derelict ship came into view. It was massive, far larger than anything he had anticipated. Its hull was scarred, pockmarked with the telltale signs of battle, and its once bright lights flickered weakly in the darkness. The design was unfamiliar, though it bore some resemblance to the vessels used by one of the alien factions the Federation had encountered in recent years. Marcus's instincts screamed at him to be cautious. He had seen traps like this before, a seemingly harmless ship, floating aimlessly, only to spring to life and attack the moment you let your guard down. But the distress signal was genuine, at least as far as he could tell. And if there were survivors aboard, he couldn't just leave them to die. "Computer, initiate docking procedures," he commanded, his voice steady despite the unease gnawing at him. The ship's AI chirped in acknowledgement, guiding his fighter toward the derelict's docking bay. As he approached, Marcus's unease deepened. The docking bay doors were already open, an invitation he didn't trust. But orders were orders. With a deep breath, he guided his ship inside, the fighter's landing struts clanking against the cold metal floor. The moment his ship touched down, the derelict came to life. The docking bay doors slammed shut, trapping him inside. Warning alarms blared in his cockpit, and his screens were flooded with error messages. Before Marcus could react, his ship's systems were hijacked, the controls ripped from his hands as if by an invisible force. "What's going on?" Marcus shouted, trying to wrestle back control. But it was no use. His ship was locked down, every system overridden by an external source. The distress signal on his console flickered, then changed, transforming into a Federation code he recognized immediately, an emergency transmission protocol, reserved for traitors and spies. No, Marcus breathed, his heart pounding. It was a setup, a trap designed to frame him. But why? And by whom? Before he could process what was happening, a transmission was sent out from his ship, broadcasting his coordinates to the entire galaxy. The message was clear: Marcus Hale, traitor to the Federation, wanted dead or alive. Panic surged through him, but he forced it down, focusing on the immediate problem. He had to get out, had to escape before whoever set this up came to finish the job. With a quick, practiced motion, he bypassed the ship's compromised systems, forcing a manual reboot. The lights flickered, then died, plunging the cockpit into darkness. Marcus's hands moved with the precision of a man who had done this 1,000 times. He flipped switches, rerouted power, and manually disengaged the docking clamps. Outside, he could hear the distant whine of approaching engines, likely bounty hunters, already converging on his location. Come on, he muttered, sweat beading on his forehead. With a final flick of a switch, the ship's engines roared to life. The docking bay doors groaned as they were forced open by the ship's thrusters, and Marcus slammed the throttle forward, rocketing out into space just as the first of the bounty hunters arrived. Blaster fire streaked past him, narrowly missing his ship. Marcus banked hard to the left, weaving through the debris fields surrounding the derelict. His heart raced, adrenaline surging through his veins as he evaded the pursuing ships. They were fast, but he was faster. Years of combat experience had honed his reflexes to a razor's edge, and he used every trick he knew to stay one step ahead, but he couldn't run forever. The bounty hunters were relentless, and more would be coming. He needed a plan, and fast. As he sped away from the derelict, Marcus accessed the ship's navigation systems, plotting a course through a nearby asteroid field. It was risky, one wrong move, and he'd be pulverized by a stray rock, but it was his best chance to lose his pursuers. He plunged into the asteroid field, the ship's sensors screaming warnings at him as he dodged and weaved through the tumbling rocks. The bounty hunters followed, but they weren't as skilled, and one by one, they broke off the chase, unable to keep up. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Marcus emerged from the asteroid field, the stars stretching out before him in an endless sea of black. He was alone, for now, but the reality of his situation was beginning to sink in. The Federation thought he was a traitor. His face, his name, would be plastered across every bounty board in the galaxy. He was a marked man, with no one to turn to and nowhere to go. Think, Marcus, think, he muttered to himself, trying to push through the panic threatening to overtake him. There had to be a way out of this, a way to prove his innocence. His mind raced as he considered his options. The distress signal had to have come from somewhere, sent by someone who knew exactly what they were doing. If he could trace its origin, maybe he could find out who was behind this, and HFY. Was a long shot, but it was all he had. With renewed determination, Marcus set his ship's course for the outer reaches of the galaxy, far beyond the Federation's usual patrol routes. If he was going to find answers, he'd have to go off the grid, into the wilds where no one would think to look for him. As he traveled deeper into uncharted space, Marcus began to piece together what little information he had. The ship that had trapped him wasn't of any known design, but it bore similarities to vessels used by the Zinter, an alien race the Federation had encountered during a border dispute years ago. The Zinter were known for their advanced technology and cunning tactics, but they had largely kept to themselves since the conflict ended. Why would they target him? And what did they hope to gain by framing a Federation pilot? Questions swirled in his mind, but answers were frustratingly out of reach. All he knew was that someone, somewhere, wanted him out of the way, and they were willing to go to great lengths to make it happen. After days of flying under the radar, avoiding patrols and bounty hunters alike, Marcus finally picked up a faint signal. It was weak, barely discernible, but it was there, the same frequency as the distress signal that had started this whole mess. He followed the signal to its source, a desolate moon orbiting a dying star. The surface was barren, scarred by ancient impacts, with no signs of life or activity. But the signal was coming from below the surface, buried deep within the moon's crust. Marcus landed his ship and donned his suit, stepping out onto the moon's dusty surface. The gravity was weak, making each step feel like a slow-motion leap. He followed the signal to a hidden entrance, a camouflaged hatch nearly invisible against the rock. With a grunt, he pried it open and descended into the darkness below. The passage was narrow and winding, barely wide enough for him to squeeze through. It seemed to go on forever, twisting and turning in ways that made no sense. But Marcus pressed on, his hand resting on the blaster at his side, ready for anything. Finally, the passage opened up into a cavernous chamber, dimly lit by flickering lights. In the center of the room was a massive console, its screens displaying lines of alien code. And standing before it, hunched over the controls, was a figure Marcus recognized immediately, Dr. Elena Riker. "Elena?" Marcus called out, his voice echoing through the chamber. The woman turned, her face gaunt and pale, eyes wide with shock. "Marcus? How did you find me?" I followed the signal, he said, stepping closer. You're behind all this? Why? Elena shook her head, her hands trembling. No, you don't understand. I wasn't trying to hurt you. I was trying to warn you. Warn me? Marcus echoed, his confusion growing. Elena looked desperate, her eyes darting around the room as if searching for an escape. There's a conspiracy, Marcus. A group of rogue Federation officials, working with the Zinter. They're planning something big, something that could destroy the entire galaxy. They set you up to take the fall so no one would suspect them. Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. Why me? Because you were getting too close, Elena said, her voice barely above a whisper. You were investigating the wrong things, asking the wrong questions. They needed you out of the way. It all started to make sense, pieces of the puzzle falling into place. The strange mission assignment, the fake distress signal, the bounty hunters, it was all part of a plan to silence him before he could uncover the truth. What's their plan? Marcus asked, his mind racing. Elena hesitated, then sighed, slumping against the console. They're going to stage an attack, a false flag operation. They're going to make it look like the Zinter attacked one of our colonies, wiping it out completely. The Federation will have no choice but to declare war, and when that happens, the rogue officials will seize control, using the chaos to consolidate their power. Marcus's blood ran cold. If what Elena was saying was true, millions, no, billions, of lives were at stake. And he was the only one who could stop it. We have to expose them, Marcus said, his voice filled with determination. We have to stop the attack before it's too late. Elena nodded, her resolve hardening. I can help you. I have access to their communications network. If we can get to their command center, we can broadcast the evidence to the entire galaxy. Once the truth is out, they won't be able to hide. It was a dangerous plan, but it was the only chance they had. Together, they set off, leaving the desolate moon behind and heading for the heart of enemy territory. The journey was fraught with peril. Bounty hunters, mercenaries, and Federation patrols were all hunting for them, but Marcus's piloting skills and Elena's knowledge of the enemy's tactics kept them one step ahead. They traveled through treacherous space regions, navigating asteroid fields, dodging black holes, and even surviving a close encounter with a Zinter warship. But the closer they got to their destination, the more dangerous the journey became. The rogue officials had anticipated their moves, and every step was met with fierce resistance. In one particularly harrowing battle, Marcus was forced to sacrifice a key ally, a fellow pilot who had joined their cause, in order to buy time for Elena to access the enemy's network. The loss weighed heavily on Marcus, but he knew there was no turning back. The fate of the galaxy rested on their shoulders. Finally, they reached the enemy's command center, hidden deep within a fortified asteroid base. The base was heavily guarded, with a fleet of ships patrolling the perimeter. But Marcus had a plan. Using a captured enemy fighter, they slipped past the outer defenses and infiltrated the base. Inside, they encountered fierce resistance, but Marcus fought with a determination born of desperation. He cut through the enemy forces with precision, while Elena worked to disable the base's defenses and access the command center's control room. As they reached the heart of the base, Marcus could see the rogue officials gathered around a massive holographic display, finalizing their plans for the attack. He could hear their voices, cold and calculating, as they discussed the best way to frame the Zinter and ensure the Federation's retaliation. But before they could execute their plan, Marcus and Elena burst into the room, weapons drawn. The officials turned in shock, their hands going to their own weapons, but Marcus was faster. With a single, well-placed shot, he took down the leader, a high-ranking Federation officer who had orchestrated the entire conspiracy. Elena, meanwhile, hacked into the command center systems, broadcasting the evidence of the conspiracy across the galaxy. The rogue officials tried to stop her, but Marcus held them off, his blaster firing with deadly accuracy. As the evidence spread, the truth became impossible to ignore. The Federation forces, once loyal to the rogue officials, turned against them, arresting those involved and dismantling their operations. The Zinter, now aware of the plot to frame them, withdrew from the conflict, avoiding a catastrophic war. In the end, Marcus and Elena stood victorious, the conspiracy exposed, and the galaxy saved from destruction. But the cost had been high, and Marcus knew that his fight was far from over. With the rogue officials in custody, the Federation cleared Marcus of all charges, restoring his rank and honors. But the experience had changed him. He could no longer trust the organization he had once served so faithfully. Instead of returning to his old life, Marcus chose a new path. He and Elena took command of a new, advanced spacecraft, one designed for stealth and speed. Their mission: to hunt down the remaining conspirators and ensure that no one could ever threaten the galaxy again. As they set off on their next mission, Marcus looked out at the stars, a sense of purpose filling him. The fight for justice was far from over, but he knew that as long as he and Elena stood together, there was nothing they couldn't overcome. And so, the story of Marcus Hale, the interstellar fugitive turned galactic hero, continued, with new adventures and challenges waiting just beyond the horizon.